So here's the Baku Grand Prix this weekend, one of my favourite races of the calendar, and it's a sprint race weekend with potentially new rules for the sprint race itself on the Saturday. In this video, I'll go over what the new rule is, discuss whether the new rule has been coming to slow Red Bull down, and also discussing what we should be looking out for in the Baku race going forward. So sprint race weekend, the first one of the year, and for me personally, I love sprint race weekends. It's more action, and more excitement, and more going on. Some purists are not a fan of sprint races, and some people who like sprint races, and with the new rule that's come out now, don't like the sprint races. For me, you know, I've been a fan of the sprint races. Initially, when it first came out, when they first announced the sprint races, I was like, what is this? I wasn't really into it, didn't really like the idea. But then, you know, I got into them last year, and I was really into them last year, like some of the races that are going on. It's good that they're not doing it every weekend, because I think that'd be a bit OTT, but 6 race weekends this year, we're having sprint races. From Baku onwards, all the 10 teams have voted for it to go through. The sprint races will be a little bit different. To give a story on how qualifying was sorted for, or how a race weekend normally went before the sprint races came in. As you know, the Formula 1 happens over 3 days, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. On the Friday, you have the 2 practice sessions, FP1, FP2, and these sessions were mainly for the teams just to get on top of the setup, on top of the running, gather information, understand the tyres, and really get the car zoned in and the driver zoned in for both the qualifying session, which happens on the Saturday, and the race, which happens on the Sunday. Usually Friday is more of long running and gathering information. And then on Saturday, you have FP3 in the morning. Again, the first half hour of that is normally just gathering long run pace information. And then the last half hour of that is pretty much qualifying prep work. Saturday afternoon, you have the qualifying, and then the qualifying sets the order of the grid. And then Sunday, you have the race. That was a normal weekend. Then came in the sprint races. So that changed. So you had FP1 on Friday, and then you went straight into qualifying Friday night. And that set the grid for the sprint race on Saturday. And then the order of the sprint race would set the grid for the race on Sunday. I hope you're keeping up with me, because it's getting a bit confusing. Points are handed out in the sprint race on Saturday, but obviously it's not as many points as what you get in the main race. The issue with this sprint race formula is that 2 things. One, because of the order of the grid on Sunday was based on the finishing order of the sprint race on Saturday, people weren't racing at 100%, because they always had one at the back of their mind, they're always thinking that the main race, the main points are on Sunday. So if you take any risks on this Saturday, it could impact the rest of the weekend. So you had that main issue there. And then the second issue was free practice 2, which was the old free practice 3. Because the car was in parc fermé, which means that you can't change many details of the car after qualifying, which is now on a Friday, it meant that that session was irrelevant to the teams, and it was just like a session that wasn't really giving them too much. Obviously, anytime you're on a car, you get some benefits to it, but for the actual weekend, it wasn't. We couldn't make any changes basically. So the teams were like, you know, what's the point of this session? So with that in mind, Formula 1 decided to do these 2 things to hit both of those 2 things on the head. The first thing is they're going to split the sprint races, going to split the 2 races. The sprint race is just going to be a standalone race, so that whatever finishing position you finish in the sprint race, it doesn't affect what happens in the main race. So that means hopefully the drivers will take more risk and they'll be more adventurous with their overtakes and racing on the Saturday. But then obviously that means how you're going to set the grid for these 2 races. So the Friday is going to follow the same suit and still be the same, with free practice 1 and then qualifying, which would be for the main race. And then free practice 3, which is the irrelevant session, that's now going to be a shorter sprint race qualifying, which determines the grid for the sprint race. So it's going to be shorter. They'll be looking for everyone just to do 1 lap in each session, which will add more excitement, and to bring it more, add more excitement, add more critical sessions in the weekend for the fans trackside to watch and for the fans on the TV to watch. Some people said they've made this change to give more jeopardy and to hopefully maybe cause some issues for Red Bull. I disagree. I think they just wanted to bring up more entertainment into the sprint races, more entertainment into the weekend, and more entertainment for people at home. Now, that is a lot of sessions. Do I think it's too much? I personally think it is, because you're asking someone to, it's not too much for me, but you're asking someone to come home from work, rush home from work to watch qualifying on a Friday, get up, watch qualifying again Saturday morning, watch the sprint race Saturday afternoon, and then the race on Sunday. Like, I'm married. I already take up so much of my time watching Formula 1 at weekends that my wife is like, let me have the TV, you're spending too much time in front of the TV, let's go out and do something. There's fans out there that don't watch every single session and are just happy watching qualifying and the race. Now there's 4 sessions. But on the flip side, if you've got a weekend ticket and you're trackside, then obviously this is very, very, very exciting for you, because you're going to be there all 3 days and you've got action on all the 3 days. And if you're someone like me, who for the British Grand Prix, I've only bought a Friday ticket. So this year there's no sprint race at the British Grand Prix, so it'll just be free practice 1, free practice 2. There'll be no critical action on that day. And if it rains, there's the potential of me like missing out on action, because the team's cars won't be running on track as often as they would if it was a dry day. So that's a risk that I'm taking with just a Friday ticket to the British Grand Prix. Whereas if it's raining at Baku this weekend, then obviously there's going to be qualifying action regardless of what the weather is doing, because you need to get out there and you need to get in the time. So it's interesting. It's an interesting change for Formula 1. It's an interesting direction that they're going down with these sprint races, and I can only see that there's going to be more sprint races in the future. So the purists will be not happy, but if you're a new fan to Formula 1 and you love more action, you love to see more cars, more racing, then you will be happy. Apart from that, obviously the Baku Grand Prix, one of my favourite races to watch. Street track, lots of action, safety cars, accidents, bish bash bosh. You know, it's one of the races that breeds excitement. There's always something that goes on in this race. It's a nice wide track for overtaking, nice long straight, and then it's got the twisty bit, the castle, where Leclerc, you know, unfortunately crashed at one point one season. But yeah, but it's also the beginning of the development race. So as you know, we've had the flyaway races for the first 3 races of the season, and traditionally when we come back to the European season, the European section of the races is when the development begins, and it's a part where the team bring new parts to the car, and it's where the teams might jump up in order or they might fall behind in your order. So obviously the big question is Mercedes. They're not bringing the main part to this race. There's talk about it to bringing it to a later race, but obviously we'll see if they bring anything to this race that might help them move forward. Obviously you've got Aston Martin. They came out with a great car straight out of the box. Do they have the potential and skills to develop this car to keep it as the second best car throughout the year? Or will Ferrari and Mercedes overtake them? Then you got Red Bull. Obviously, Red Bull will have less development time with the punishment that they had last year, which means they've got less wind tunnel time, which means that throughout the season they should, in theory, get the gap to Red Bull should shrink throughout the season. Will we start seeing that from the Baku race? Will that gap start shrinking? We shall see. McLaren, they're not in a good situation at the moment, but we'll see if they bring any parts. Toro Rosso, all the teams will be bringing parts, whether it's big or small, they'll be bringing parts, and it'll be interesting to see who makes a step forward. Hopefully, the teams get closer to Red Bull, because we could do with a race at the front. If you found this video helpful or interesting, feel free to like and subscribe. We've got plenty more videos coming up in the future. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.